Now let's see what techniques we can use to create the powder brows. I switch my machine on the medium speed, medium length needle, and we pick up a little bit of the pigment with the tip of the cartridge. The tip of the cartridge touches the pigment. You don't have to immerse it fully, but just a little bit it has to touch. So now you will see the movement of my hand, how to work with the machine. Later in the video you will see the needle itself and how the pigment is implanted. So here we will have our machine 90 degrees to the skin, and we will make little strokes. You can implant the pigment when you go only to one direction or to both directions. What I mean is that when the stroke goes towards you, you can implant the pigment, but when it goes back to the initial position, you can lift it a little bit and not implant the pigment. Otherwise, it can be implanted in both sides while the needle goes to both sides. If you choose to implant the pigment when it's going to the both sides, like when it goes towards you, you implant pigment, and when it goes away from you, you also implant the pigment. Like this, the result will be more intense color, and sometimes faster. The result will be achieved faster. The machine is held very near the cartridge. Like this, you have more control of the machine. Imagine if you would hold it very high on its body, you have less control of the stroke. So quite near the cartridge. It makes sense to start from the tail of the eyebrow, because if you start from the beginning of the eyebrow and it's a new client, you are not sure yet how the skin absorbs the pigment. What if her skin absorbs the pigment immediately and you didn't want to create such an intensive beginning of the eyebrow? Yes, in powder technique we want natural, gradual shading where the beginning of the eyebrow and a part of the top eyebrow is lighter than the rest of it. So we don't want to begin at the very, very beginning of the eyebrow. We want to make it lighter. So if you want to be safe, you can start with the tail. The tail will normally be a bit darker, so even if the skin absorbs the pigment very quickly, it's not a big deal because that's what you wanted initially. And here you can see how the machine is moving between the fingers. Your hand is stable, it is put on the skin to give you more stability, and only the fingers are moving and the machine between the fingers. And we are filling in the eyebrow in the stroke movements. Back and forth, normal length of the movement. Again, you will have to adapt. If you see that the skin absorbs the pigment too fast and you want a more natural result, you can make the needle longer, like this less pigment will be flowing out, or do the movements quicker. Like this, less pigment will be implanted in the skin. While performing the powder brow technique, I would suggest to go from one eyebrow to the other. One pass on one eyebrow, first pass on the second eyebrow, second pass on the first eyebrow, second pass on the second eyebrow. I would suggest to go back and forth from one eyebrow to the other, and not to complete one eyebrow first and then the other. Why is that? Because with time, for example, when you have finished your work, with time, the color turns a bit darker actually, because it starts to dry. It also reacts with the air, gets oxygenated, and becomes darker. So when you have finished with both eyebrows, then one will look darker, or you will always want to make the second eyebrow darker, as dark as the first one. So I would suggest really to go from one eyebrow to the other in order not to make mistake about the color intensity. So here I am almost finished with the shading. You would want to create a little bit of shadow, kind of more intense color at the base of the eyebrow. The down part of the eyebrow will always naturally be a bit darker, so the top is always lighter and the beginning of the eyebrow is also normally lighter. So let's say you did the first pass, you decide if the color is fine for you. Let's not forget that it will lose a little bit of color. So if the base color is good, you can work only on the darker parts and leave the lighter parts alone. You don't have to repeat them. And let's not forget about the other hand. With the other hand, you will stabilize the skin. You will stretch it as well with 2 fingers. And by stretching, you create a flat surface, and it's easy for the pigment to be implanted precisely. Normally in powder brows, we repeat each brow around 3 times, sometimes even more. If the skin doesn't absorb the pigment properly, you would need maybe 5 times. However, it will also depend a lot on the desired result. That's another reason why you should go from one eyebrow to the other eyebrow and not to complete one eyebrow first, because the color gets more intensive during the treatment. And let's say you finished with one pass, you went to the other eyebrow, you come back to the first eyebrow and the color will already be a little bit different. That's why it's important to wait a bit for the eyebrow to get to kind of bloom, for the color to bloom. And here I have finished the first eyebrow and I remove the pigment residue. I also use a paper napkin to absorb any water residue from the wet napkin. And here you can see the base of the eyebrow is a bit darker, and the front of the eyebrow and the upper part is lighter. That's how it is naturally in our eyebrows, or at least how it should be. Okay, and now let's go and see how the needle works. Here I zoomed in to see the needle better. I picked up some pigment and you can see how the machine is 90 degrees to the skin. You grab it as if it was a pencil, and in little strokes you kind of scratch the skin. With the other hand, you will feel the vibration, little vibration. If you don't feel any different vibration, it means that the color is probably not implanted. So you really have to maybe adapt a little bit your hand position, or you just need to practice a lot. Nothing comes without practice. It's not enough just to watch the videos and not take any action. You have to practice. In the beginning, you can find some models for your practice inside your own circle of people. Let's say your mom, your sister, your friends. You can start doing it for free just to practice. And later, to begin your professional career, in permanent makeup field, you can take some clients for a little fee. You can even mention that you are just starting out, and later you can raise your prices as appropriate. And that's how it always goes. At first you need to train on somebody, then your prices are lower because you don't have enough experience yet. And when you feel really confident, it can take you around, I would say there are even stages. The first stage would be 1 to 3 years. You can raise your prices, and then next is 5 years, 5 to 10 years. And from 10 years of experience, you are like a really good expert. You can even choose with which clients or which skin you want to work or not. And of course, your premium price would be well justified. And let's come back to the video, see how I am creating a shadow, darker part of the eyebrow, the base of the eyebrow, where naturally most of the hairs would be concentrated. And in little strokes, we fill in any places which are lighter than they should be. So now let's remove the residue of the pigment and see what result do we have. We take a wet napkin. Here I use just simple baby wet napkins. Here we have quite a light version. If you want, you can leave it like that, or with additional pastes, you can create a more intensive look.